A general election. But can the pro-Europeans do what some say is impossible and even now rewrite the plan for Brexit?
The general election is not going to reverse us leaving the EU, but we must support those MPs who are going to stand up against hard Brexit.
The biggest brain in the universe attempts to solve the election countdown conundrum with his sonic screwdriver.
There's a serious fault with the space-time continuum. Could this be the end of politics as we know it?
And give me a vowel, give me a consonant. I'm sorry there'll be no points for spelling big nasty like that.
I think all politicians are the same. Do you think the general election is going to change anything? What do you say?
Come on, everyone, don't listen to him. It's going to be the greatest contest yet. So let's join tonight's host. Oh, that's me, Andrew Neil. Evening all, welcome to this week. Hold it up to the light, not a brain in sight. But our anger is palpable. We leave you to your own admittedly limited devices for 2 weeks and all hell breaks out. The Prime Minister had categorically assured us 6 times there would be no election before 2020. So naturally she called one the moment our backs were turned. Who would have thunk it? A politician saying one thing and doing another. By the time we got back, old Jezza had morphed into Blighty's answer to Cesar Chavez. Without the oil or the sun. The Lib Dems were predicting the biggest comeback since Fleetwood Mac reformed in 1997, and Aaron Banks said he'd be UKIP's candidate in Clacton, just as soon as he can find it on a map. Meanwhile, Uncle Nige decided against an 8th failed bid to become an MP. Fox News is so much more fun and lucrative. And Boy George finally worked out that editing a newspaper is actually a full-time job. Pity that didn't dawn on him when he was running the economy. Here this week, we've reached peak apathy, so much so that most of the team hasn't even bothered to turn up. That's right. No sad man on a train, no departing man on the left. Instead, I'm joined by the replacement bus services of late-night political chat, our very own coalition of chaos. Chaka, hashtag smooth operator Umuna, and Anne, hashtag cha-cha-cha Widdicombe. Welcome to you both. And what did you think when you had the election?
I wouldn't have done it at this time. I thought that we should have another year getting Brexit to be fully accepted, people just realising that that was the way we're going to go. My fear was always that if we had it too soon, it would turn into a second referendum. But nevertheless, she has called it. I don't think there's any doubt about what the outcome's going to be. She's going to win it. And so I'm getting ready to get behind her.
Very well. What did you think, or what was your reaction?
2 things. I think most people in Westminster, most parliamentarians on both sides of the House, thought if there was going to be a general election, there would have been an announcement before the Easter recess. And I think given the recess started, people thought, look, the moment's passed. So they were quite stunned.
I agree.
On Tuesday. My second thought was, well, why is she doing it? I mean, this whole thing about, you know, there's disunity in the House of Commons on Brexit and we need unity. I mean, look, very rarely is there unity on major issues in the House of Commons.
The purpose of the Commons is not really to be united.
Well, that's right. In a healthy democracy, you need to have that contest of ideas. But really, I think what this is about, she's been posing very much as a kind of Margaret Thatcher type figure and Prime Minister. And I think she's terrified of becoming John Major. And I think she could see with a small majority that she would become John Major on steroids in terms of being weak and ending up with battle going on internally in her party. And I think she's gambling on a more moderate set of...
Not much of a gamble, is it?
Well...
Not much of a gamble, given the
we'll
state
come
you're
on to that.
We'll come on, but
I get... Do you get my drift? I mean, she's gambling on more moderate, less Eurosceptic MPs coming in to give her more flexibility, perhaps.
And getting her own mandate, I suppose, as well, has something to do with it on these lines. Anyway, the lady is for turning after all. The Prime Minister says she needs a mandate to overcome resistance from the Lords to the Lib Dems to her Brexit strategy. Obviously, the Tories' stonking lead in the polls played no part in her calculations whatsoever. Mrs May hopes for a huge endorsement of what she means by Brexit. So is this the last hurrah for the Remainers, or do they have any hope of stopping Brexit in its tracks? Here's Gina Miller with her take of the week.
Land a few years down the track, worse off, deserted by foreign workers and without the great opportunities we once had. Theresa May says she's called this election to ensure there's unity in Westminster and no turning back on Brexit. But as my court victory showed, the referendum didn't hand the Prime Minister a blank cheque, and nor should this election, especially as we don't know the terms of the deal we'll get. The government must not be allowed to succeed in killing off all opposition to Brexit. In an ideal world, we'll have time to put together a progressive alliance, but there simply isn't that time. That's why I'm part of a crowd-funded, tactical voting campaign, hoping to endorse those who are opposed to a hard Brexit. We're hoping to back a wide slate of candidates who we can trust will back a meaningful vote at the end of the negotiations. So many MPs are against Brexit, but can't speak up because of the referendum. But now is not the time to keep quiet. In fact, if the ultimate deal leaves us worse off than we are today, MPs must feel empowered to reject it. This election is going to be more important than any in living memory. It's the one that's going to be talked about in the pubs. It'll be about Brexit, so I urge you, look closely at what candidates say on the issue and vote for the one who stands on principle and does what's best for Britain.
And thanks to Apocalypse Events, The Village. Don't all rush there at once. Gina Miller's with us now. Welcome to the programme. Now, you said at the end there, talking about voting for people who do the best for Britain. But that's just code for wanting to vote for people who stop Brexit, isn't it?
We're not talking about stopping Brexit.
It's what you want to do.
No, it is not. If you stand back from the emotion of this all, it is pure logic and common sense that there are all options on the table. And there are broadly three options. One is for a fantastic deal where everyone gets what they want. The second is WTO, which the government itself has accepted is far more complicated than they first envisaged. And the third is looking at if we would be better off remaining. Now, anybody who says...
And you would vote to remain?
No, because I was never for a remain or leave. It was about remaining if that was the best option.
But
this has to be about
everything you do
options.
is calculated to thwart Brexit. That's what you're about. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a democracy. You're allowed to thwart whatever you want. But why not just admit it instead of having this kind of carapace of other motives over it?
Well, I love that you know what's in my mind, because it's not.
It's quite easy to see.
No, it is
hold
not.
on, you just talked about a country. We will be deserted by foreign workers. That was how you opened your piece. You think we're going to hell in a handbasket if we leave.
No, I'm interested in the facts. I'm not interested in the emotions of any of this.
Well, why will we be deserted by foreign workers?
Because you can already see that if we are not going to have access to free movement, there will be a problem.
Why will we be deserted by foreign workers by leaving the EU?
Because we will not have free movement of people.
But why will we be deserted?
Need them.
Deserted means all the people coming who are already here will leave. Why?
Well, from the experience I've had since I started my court case, there is an air around people in the UK where they feel that they've been kicked in their stud. They haven't left yet.
No, so why would we be deserted? I mean, the point is that phrase, deserted by foreign workers, a Britain much poorer, it shows what you really think. It's a perfectly legitimate point of view, but you don't seem to want to be honest enough just to admit that that is what your game plan is.
I'm honest enough to say that nobody knows the future.
You just said we'll be deserted by foreign workers.
No, that is a possibility. And already we're seeing that people are feeling that they're not welcomed here and that then somehow...
Who's not welcome here?
I get thousands and thousands of emails from people and messages and phone calls from people saying that they feel then they are no longer welcomed.
But that's because you've taken a high-profile position. We all get that. I get lots of attacks on things as well, and you've
No, I've not had attacks. I'm not talking about the attacks.
No, I mean verbal attacks.
No, I'm not talking about the attacks. I'm talking about people's experiences of how they feel. They feel that they're no longer welcomed here, that they feel that this is not the country that they thought it was.
All right. What do you make of Gina's tactical voting plan?
Well, first of all, to talk about a Brexit that's not really a Brexit is a complete nonsense. We cannot continue to be governed by EU laws remain subject to free movement of labour, and actually have anything that qualifies for the title Brexit. It is one or the other. I mean, I share Andrew's view. You know, for goodness sake, say what you mean, which is that you want to remain. And let's have that debate. My worry always was this was going to turn into a second referendum. There are other issues which we ought to be discussing, but that wasn't the question you asked me. It was about tactical voting, wasn't it?
Will it work?
It generally doesn't. I mean, you'll always get some uptake, but it generally doesn't. And every time I hear in elections, oh, well, there's going to be tactical voting, there's going to be alliances, there's going to be people withdrawing in favour of other people. Doesn't actually happen because the canvas is so broad that in the end people aren't just deciding on Brexit, however important it is. I mean, would you really vote for Corbyn just because there's a pro-Remain candidate there? I mean, you won't.
Well, I mean, Mr. Corbyn is not overwhelmingly pro-Remain, I think, as we can see.
That wasn't my point. That wasn't my point.
Why should there not be a referendum on the final deal?
I have to say, I'm not the biggest fan of referenda, partly because I think people elect members of parliament to give effect to their wishes. And I think we saw with the referendum and the triggering of Article 50 the difficulties for members of parliament when they're juxtaposed against a direct democratic popular vote. So personally, I would rather it was members of parliament voting on it.
So it goes to the Commons rather than to a referendum, is what?
Yes, because we're elected to do a job. Now, I think what Gina's doing is very interesting and actually very helpful in the context of this election for people who are part of that 48% who want to know where different MPs stand on things. And I think what your project is going to help voters do is be able to identify whether you've got somebody who is in favour of a soft Brexit.
What is a soft Brexit?
Yeah.
Well,
thank you.
Look, there are two ways of... This is my subjective analysis of it. I know Anne's got a different...
That's why I'm asking your opinion.
Yeah. Look, there are two ways, I think, of withdrawing from the EU. You can do it in a quite extreme way, in a job-destroying and livelihood-destroying way.
What's a soft Brexit?
Well, my definition of a soft Brexit would be where we remain a member of the single market.
So we'd still be subject to the European
Free
Court of
movement of
Justice?
labour.
Yes, but hang on just a minute. I think
that's right.
Yeah, that's right. But
so in what way have we left?
Well, hang on just a minute. Let me finish. A lot is made of that point, but of course, if we want to continue trading with the European Union, the free trade agreement will be governed by some other authority.
Well, but it will not necessarily be governed by the European Court.
Yes, but also, Andrew, if we want to continue trading into the European Union, as Leavers and Remainers are both saying, we're going to have to comply with the standards and the rules that are set by the Europeans.
We have to do that for America, to export to America.
Sure,
we have to do that. But there's no. Last time I looked, there's no freedom of movement between Britain and America. Let me come back to Gina Miller's very patient here. Would you like a referendum if and when there is a deal done?
No, I think it should be up to the ministers in Parliament. That's why we have
MPs.
MPs in Parliament, because we have a parliamentary democracy. We don't have a direct democracy. And I think if we elect MPs, they should be able to vote, have a meaningful vote on whatever the deal is.
But they are.
Well, we don't know that.
Well, they are. How could any government stop them?
Well, if you look at the government's copybook on using the royal prerogative Article 50, in my case, they tried to bypass Parliament. So how do you know they won't do that again?
Well, the government's already said it's inconceivable for the European Parliament to have a vote on the final deal and not the British Parliament. So it's on the record.
Mrs May has promised that there will be a vote. On a hard deal or no deal. That's not a meaningful vote. A meaningful vote is a vote on all the options that are available to MPs.
A meaningful vote is, this is the deal that has been negotiated, and there will only be one deal negotiated at the end of it, and this is its components. And do we accept that or not? That is the only question that can be asked, because there is no other deal on offer.
No, but there are three options on the deal. No, there are three options, not two.
There's another way of doing it, which is to give Parliament a vote earlier so that it can actually say to the Prime Minister, look, go back and...
Oh, it can tie the Prime Minister's hands in negotiations.
Go back.
Oh, that's bright, isn't it?
Well, I disagree with this notion of how it affects her bargaining power.
Of course it will affect.
But an interesting thing, can I just slightly come on a different tack here, is the extent to which this general election that we're going to have is ultimately going to be governed by this Remain Leave issue, or whether by the end of this 7-week period, 7 weeks today,
Sure, but we're talking about
reflects
that,
back to
that's process.
economic
We'll talk
competence.
about that
But it's not. It's whether it's economic competence,
right,
leadership,
we're coming
and all
on to
those
the
things.
election in a minute. I want to stick with the reason why we've got Gina Miller here tonight. It's been I think, a legitimate criticism from the Remain side that the country voted to leave, but the actual shape of leaving was not exactly clear. People had different views about it. Mrs. May herself was a Remainer. But if she now campaigns for Brexit in this election campaign, in which she says, which is her position, we're leaving membership of the single market, we want to leave the customs union, we want to get out of the European court, and we want an end of free movement of people.
Yes.
And if she wins the election on a big mandate, she's got a negotiating mandate to do that, hasn't she?
Absolutely.
So it would be wrong to
absolutely no
thwart her.
problem. Well, no, of course there wouldn't be, because I mean
So what's the point of this progressive alliance?
Because what we're talking about is ensuring that there isn't this huge mandate, because the options, as far as we see it, is that you have you look back to what Francis Pym said in 1983, is that, an elected majority is almost an elected dictatorship. And that's the thing we're saying.
Well, it was Hailsham that said election dictatorship. Francis Pym just speculated that maybe the Tory majority could be too big. But you would accept, therefore, if she gets because she will have to spell out what her negotiating position is going to be.
I think all the manifestos will.
And if she gets a mandate for that, then that's it. She's got the mandate to go and negotiate on that basis.
She does, but no Prime Minister is above the law. And if in 18 months, 2 years, 5 years, whenever it is that the Prime Minister comes back with the negotiated package and doesn't give Parliament a full, meaningful vote, then we may have to seek the advice of the courts onto whether she's allowed to do that.
Back to the courts.
Because nobody is above the law.
I understand that. But if you turned tinkering or interfering with the democratic process into a rich woman's hobby?
When is it my hobby and when is it I'm a rich woman?
Well, it seems
I actually have a significant day job and several other day jobs. This is not a hobby. I'm a transparency campaigner. I've done this for nearly a decade. And also, is it okay that if I'm rich because I've earned my own money that I might use it to do my civic
I've just wondered
duty?
whether it's become your hobby or not.
It's absolutely not my hobby. I'm doing what I think is right.
Because when you did the court case at the beginning, you said that I just want the court case to rule that the Commons gets a vote on it. That's all I'm.
It was about democracy.
And you did
absolutely.
that. But now you're on to a progressive alliance, and now you're saying I may have to go back to the
Which is
courts.
still about democracy.
Yeah, but
it is still about democracy.
It's given you a new purpose in life, hasn't it?
Absolutely not. It's the same purpose, which is everyone has the duty to stand up for what they believe in. And if they believe in democracy, then stand up and talk about it.
OK. Gina Miller, thank you. I think we'll see you again. Now it's late. Stand down as a Labour MP late, but not fear, because waiting on the wings is grime legend Big Nasty. I listen to his tunes every day and ding, he's here putting apathy in our spotlight, innit? So get on dem social media vibes, fam. No idea what I'm saying here. What's happening, my little face bozos? Get tweet twerking, because we've had enough snap for 1 week. #base. Now, it's generally accepted that Comrade Corbyn is facing the electoral uphill struggle of a lifetime. One recent poll puts Labour 24 points behind the Tories. But Jez is no stranger to long odds. After all, nobody thought he'd be later Labour leader, including himself. But the polls can't be ignored. They are the peak of political science, reliable, solid, rarely wrong. Just ask David Cameron or Hillary Clinton. Here's Giles Brandreth with his roundup of the political week.
Westminster has been rocked to the core. News of a shock contest. A battle so exciting, it's torn the space-time continuum. The whole country is agog. The contest is on. Who will be chosen as the new Doctor Who? What? An election? Another one?
I have just chaired a meeting of the Cabinet where we agreed that the government should call a general election to be held on the 8th of June. It will be a choice between strong and stable leadership in the national interest, with me as your Prime Minister, or weak and unstable coalition government led by Jeremy Corbyn, propped up by the Liberal Democrats who want to reopen the divisions of the referendum, and Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP.
Hang on, I'm a Time Lord. I can jump forward to when the whole thing's over. I knew we shouldn't have let Michael loose with the sonic screwdriver. No one saw the PM's move coming, least of all the Labour Party. But Jeremy Corbyn was ready.
I welcome the opportunity for us to put the case to the people of Britain to stand up against this government and its failed economic agenda, which has left our NHS in problems, which has left our schools underfunded, which has left so many people uncertain. We want to put a case out there for the people of Britain of a society that cares for all.
With Labour trailing 20% in the polls, Jeremy Corbyn has quite a job on his hands. Not least with convincing some of his own party.
But I will not countenance ever voting to make Jeremy Corbyn Britain's Prime Minister. I cannot countenance endorsing him for a role which I think even he, although he may say differently in front of the cameras, does not think he is fit to carry out.
The rest of the opposition sounded more up for the fight. Chaps.
Well, it's an opportunity for the people of this country to change the direction of this country, to decide that they do not want a hard Brexit, they want to keep Britain in the single market, and indeed it's an opportunity for us to have a decent, strong opposition in this country that we desperately need.
Things can happen very, very quickly, and there can be seismic changes very, very rapidly, and we are already polling more highly than we were at the time of the 2015 general election.
Clearly she sees the opportunity, given the total disarray in the ranks of the Labour Party, to crush all opposition to her, to get rid of people that disagree with her, and to give herself a free hand to take the country in the increasingly right-wing direction that she wants to take it in. I relish the prospect of getting out there, standing up for Scotland's interests and values, standing up for Scotland's voice being heard.
Logical, cool, calculating, stripped of all emotion, hell-bent on destroying her enemies.
Brexit means Brexit. Britain is leaving the European Union. There can be no turning back. Brexit means Brexit.
Oh no, it's Cyber May!
I have set out the divisions that have become clear on this issue. They can and will be used against us, weakening our hand in the negotiations to come, and we must not let that happen. And that's why it's the right and responsible thing for all of us here today to vote for a general election.
The Commons passed the PM's bill resoundingly. Just 13 MPs voted against. With opposition like that, Mrs May really does need a mandate to govern.
The ayes to the right, 522. The noes to the left, 13.
Fighting an election was just one job too many for George Osborne. He'll be standing down.
Aww.
But don't worry, Osborne fans. The former Chancellor and Tory election strategist will, he promises, be putting his oar in from the comfort of the London Evening Standard. Provided he remembers those copy deadlines, of course.
Our country's got some big decisions to make now about the kind of Britain we want to be. And those values of openness, tolerance, diversity, enterprise, they're the values that I hold dear. They're ones I fought for in government as Chancellor, fought for in Parliament as the MP for Tatton. And now I'm going to fight for them in that editor's chair at the Evening Standard.
The PM, that apparently quiet vicar's daughter, has shown her hand, and it turns out to be an iron fist in a steel glove. No opportunity will be given to doubters, no quarter given to the opposition, and definitely no silly TV debates.
If the Prime Minister is so confident that our hard Brexit, pro-austerity, anti-immigration case is right, then she should debate it with opposition leaders during the campaign. We look forward to the straight fight between the SNP and the Tories. Can the Prime Minister tell the people why she's running scared of a televised debate with Nicola Sturgeon?
When I say run, run!
Election debate. Election debate. Election debate.
And thanks to the Who shop in Upton Park, East London, who loaned Giles their TARDIS and then set the Dalek on him. He probably deserved it. With me now is the lovely Miranda Green. And UKIP Suzanne Evans. Welcome to you.
Oh, am I not lovely too?
Of course, you're lovely.
Thank you.
You can be like, it was meant to cover you both. I just read it badly for a change. Chukwuemeka, why is your party 24 points behind in the polls?
Polls go up and down.
Yours just go down.
Well, the ultimate one that will matter is how your viewers and voters cast their votes on the 8th of June.
Why are you 24 points behind?
We've had a interesting, difficult 2 years, but what you will see the Labour Party doing now over the next few weeks is coming together and putting forward as a team an offer to the country.
Well, 12 of your MPs have said they're standing down. That's not coming together.
It's not unusual general
A
elections.
lot of them. They're not all at retirement age, are they?
Anne's done it. She stood down at an election.
After 23 years.
Yeah, some of them have
What
been
about
in
Michael
there
Duggar?
for 20
And I
odd
was
years.
gone 6.
Michael Duggar?
Well, you know, there are, you know, however long people have been in, we're sad to lose them. But it's the nature of politics. You know, you don't do this job forever.
Would Jeremy Corbyn make a good Prime Minister?
Look, there's been a lot of talk about how difficult this question is for MPs.
So have you not worked out the answer yet?
No, my answer is very simple. I'm a Labour MP. It's not just about...
No, I know you're a Labour MP. I didn't ask you that.
It's not... No,
I do
will you
know
let
that.
me finish my sentence?
Well, I'd like you know. I'd like you to answer the question. Would he make a good Prime Minister?
I want the Labour team and its captain to get into government, and I will always think that the team and the captain will be better than a Tory one. I'm a Labour MP. That's why I was elected in Stretton.
All right. Teams of spin doctors were working on that answer. Could this go wrong for Theresa May?
Well, there's always risks involved in a general election, but I think probably the outcome of this one is as certain as any outcome can ever be in a political context. She does start miles ahead in the polls. I'm terribly sorry, Chucker, but no, Jeremy Corbyn can't actually be seen as a realistic PM.
No, I didn't ask you. I didn't ask you that question because I knew what the answer would be.
But she's got. So I'm saying she's starting with all the advantages. She would need to throw something away for anything to go really wrong. I don't think she will.
It's late at night, so let's have the Department of Honesty. What's the real reason she's called the election?
Oh, I think she wants to secure a large majority because I think there are going to be some very tough negotiations ahead.
But what changed?
Well, hang on. And I think she wants to secure a proper majority and not to be weakened by always being on a knife edge in Parliament.
But
there's nothing wrong with that.
True a month ago. It was true 6 weeks ago. It was true 2 months ago.
Yes, and her view then was that she wasn't going to have a general election. She's obviously reflected on it. I don't go for all this, and it doesn't matter which party the politician is. This business about, it's a U-turn. No, it's a mature reflection that has resulted in a different decision.
No, it's a U-turn. If it looks like a U-turn, it walks like a U-turn, it sounds like a U-turn. It's the mother of all U-turns.
But U-turn is simply a pejorative way of saying that somebody's just changed their mind.
Mrs. Thatcher said, you want to turn if you want to. The lady's not for turning. She couldn't say that this time.
Goes back to she's more John Major than Mrs. T.
This is your line.
Well,
no, it's not. It's just I think that's why she's doing it.
It's a question of do you want John Major's majority or Mrs. T's majority?
What would a Lib Dem recovery look like?
Oh, good question. I think, well, it can't get worse than 8 seats. And obviously, 2015 was being smashed down onto the floor. So, they will do much better. And there is a sort of mood of wanting to take an opportunity to recover to a respectable showing in the Commons and also to kind of capitalise on Labour's weakness, because there will presumably be some Labour voters who are willing to vote Lib Dem in seats where the Lib Dems are the challenger to the Tories and came second last time, for example. But I mean, they do have to be able to actually take this opportunity, and it's not danger-free. But I think, they will improve their showing. And also, of course, the May local elections might help the Lib Dems, because if they do quite well in the local elections, that'll give them a bit of a momentum and a bit more coverage.
Let me just bring Suzanne in. This could be the beginning of the end for UKIP, couldn't it?
It could be the beginning of a new beginning as well. I mean,
How is that
Lib
gonna
Dems
work out?
can't say they could do much worse. Well, we can't do much worse than having none, which is the position at the moment, isn't it?
So
And,
Douglas Carswell could probably be the first and the last MP of your party in history.
And he could probably not be.
But he probably will
and let's
be.
let's see what happens. You know, I think
You're not confident, are you?
No, we're not confident that we're not as confident as we were, I don't think, before the 2015 general election, which was a massive disappointment to us. You know, 4 million votes, 1 member of parliament, a brilliant argument, if ever there was one, for voting reform.
Or
and
for
a more
concentrating your
sensible-
resources on seats you can win.
And concentrating, of course, we're having those discussions at the moment. Where are our target seats going to be? That's very important.
But what is your disagreement with Theresa May's stand on what she wants to see out of Brexit? What is your disagreement? What's UKIP about this time?
Well, UKIP's, in terms of Theresa May's, let's say, you know, she's talking very much in terms of her Brexit vision, but she's not being very clear as well on some other issues. And I'm very interested to see what the Tory manifesto is going to be.
No, but what Dan
Her
Widdicombe's
failure
question was, now
has
you see
been-
the problems I have.
Indeed, I do.
The question was, what
I'm
bit
sorry if I'm
of
not being-
Theresa May's Brexit strategy do you disagree with?
None at the moment. I think the vision that Theresa May
What are you
has
fighting
set
her for?
So what's the point?
The vision she has set out is all very well, but, well, for a start off, you know, UKIP is much more than Brexit.
Okay.
It really is. I know that's obviously what we've been
Grammar-
seen as
grammar
being
schools.
for grammar schools.
Well, the government's doing that.
You know, the grammar
The government's
doing that as well.
So
But, you know, UKIP
Chuka's
is
question
not...
was, what's the point? I'm quite enjoying this. You tell me now the question to ask. It's great.
But actually,
it's been a long day.
What are you about?
I'm not convinced, Anne, that Theresa May is actually going to deliver the Brexit that the British people
So how
want.
does standing against her promote a Brexit? I mean, the
What
other
are you
parties on...
suggesting that we don't stand against? We are a political party. That's what we do. We're in the business.
I'm trying to work out what you do on this
What's the
occasion.
point in you?
Well,
Let me
what's
come
it
back
about?
to a point, Chuka, you made at the head of the programme to put to Anne. You and I both remember the Ted Heath election of '74.
Vividly.
He called it on who runs the country.
He did, and the
That was the
country
issue.
said
Within a
nobody.
week, that had ceased to be the issue. Many other things had become the issue. There is a chance that this, in that way, it kind of runs away. You call an election on one issue, and the people say, well, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
That's not what we want to talk about. We want to talk about living standards having stagnated for the past 10 years. We want to talk about the difficulties
The
of getting
NHS.
good schools, of the
Public
waiting
services,
lists
yeah.
in the NHS. That's got to be a risk for her.
I have no doubt at all that all those types of issues will come up and will be debated. They're bound to in the course of a general election. But I think, in as far as one can ever make predictions in politics, it is very unlikely that Brexit will be overtaken in the sense that people will suddenly forget about it and start concentrating on other things. Now, I do remember the Ted Heath election, and he said, who rules? That was the question he put.
That's right.
Who rules? And the nation said nobody. Because
Correct.
if you remember, we
Because
ended
the
up
result
with
was
one.
indeterminate.
Yeah.
But I think that's an
But he
issue.
lost.
This is what I was going to ask Miranda,
Yeah.
actually, because I think, you know, Tim Farron reckons that the Remain Leave thing is going to produce a lot for him. But I look in my own area, OK, I'm slightly different in the sense that I suppose, you know, I'm an anti-hard Brexit MP and, you know, he'd agree with me on a lot of these things. But memories are short. And a lot of, take the NHS that Andrew just touched on, a lot of what's happening to the NHS now was instigated by Liberal Democrats with Conservatives in government. And what he's bargaining on is that areas that have been deeply affected by that, like my own, will forget the cuts and forget the responsibility that the Liberal Democrats bear for that now and say, OK, well, because he's Remain, therefore I'm going to forget all of that and support him. And I think by the end of this, I'm not sure that's going to happen. That's what I meant in terms of, I think by the end of the thing, I think it will go back to leadership, economy, those kind of issues.
Well, I think it's an interesting point because, you know, there are potential huge pitfalls for all of the main parties here. You know, the Labour's pitfalls are obvious. It's to do with the leadership deficit and the Corbyn factor. The Lib Dems do have this issue of how they deal with the coalition years.
Yeah.
And they will make a big mistake if they try and fight the last war. I mean, already some of the senior people who are standing again have made the mistake in the last 24 hours of trying to argue with the electorate about why they got such a kicking in 2015. You know, they can't do that. They need to move on. And there's plenty to talk about whether you want essentially a sort of overly dominant Conservative Party without any effective opposition, and there they can make a case that there's a contribution to make when the Labour Party is in such disarray.
The other issue,
that will be their argument.
Is also, I think if May's going into this thinking it's a Brexit election, then that might very well what people are focused on now. But we have also triggered Article 50. We are on the way out. And I actually think there will be other issues that come to the fore and take over from that very, very quickly.
And maybe that's her intention.
And I think it is. And NHS is one of them on which this Tory government has failed abysmally. The Health Secretary is one of the most unpopular there has ever been.
The Health Secretary is always unpopular.
Yeah, but this one is particularly unpopular within the NHS as well.
Health Secretary.
But I wonder if the Westminster Village doesn't overestimate the whole Remain, Leave feeling in the country.
They do. It just is not, you know, for people's everyday lives in my area. Remain, Leave, Brexit. It is very important for a lot of people. Very strong Remain constituency.
But it's not what they're talking about every morning.
Your health, the education cuts, all that. That is much more kind of immediate.
The point I was making earlier, which I think you misunderstood,
it happens all the time.
Was a very straightforward one.
Oh, then I definitely did.
Just because the Labour candidate is for Remain, why would that make you vote for Corbyn as Prime Minister? Now, that was the point I was trying to make earlier when we had Gina here. And I don't think, therefore, that Brexit will be the sole determining factor. I think competence, I think record, I think all those things will count, and will count heavily in the Prime Minister's
Well, and of course, the Prime Minister also wants to make it about leadership, as she said several times. I wonder why. Let me come back to you, Duke, on this. A lot of people on your side are realistic enough. They think that if there's any chance of into power, it would have to be with alliance. We're not going to get an overall majority. It'd have to be an alliance. But is there any hope of a kind of progressive alliance, do you think? It never seems to take off in Britain.
Well, I think the problem is, I mean, if you look on the left, and there's been this talk of Liberal Democrats, Greens and Labour, the ask is always for Labour to stand down in favour of Green and Liberal Democrat candidates when, you know, say take Stoke-on-Trent. It's not as if suddenly the Greens and Liberal Democrats were Progressive Alliance, we're going to let Labour, they're the best bet.
Yeah. But the Greens stood out of the way in Richmond in the by-election to give the Lib Dems a clear run,
I think that...
That's
was
right.
it the National or the local that did that? There was a kind of dispute, wasn't there?
Well,
I spoke to Caroline Lucas today.
Voters got the message too.
So Caroline Lucas said basically that she wants to do that, but it has to be the decision of the local party.
But I think in the end, I think I'm not, you know, some people are very squiffy about this, but I think in the end there is an issue in the sense that if there's to be any kind of alliance or coalition, that's for the voters to determine. It's not for some kind of backroom deal.
This is all a disaster because, you know, Linton Crosby's brilliant slogan, which they're just going to repeat ad nauseam, is this, you know, strong Tory leadership versus coalition of chaos. There is no prospect of a coalition with Corbyn. Nobody would touch him with a barge pole.
Between Nicola Sturgeon and Theresa May on that
that's
front,
right.
frankly.
But you see, you know, it's very difficult to talk about tactical voting without it playing into the hands of Linton Crosby. So it makes it very difficult, even on the ground. But I think there will be some of it on the ground this time.
It's clear Mrs May is going to seek a new mandate, not just for Brexit. There's a lot of things that she didn't like in the 2015 manifesto, even more that Mr Hammond, the Chancellor, didn't like. So there are going to be new things. There are going to be old promises junked, new ones put in. What is the one thing above all that would be new that you would like to see in the next Tory manifesto?
Well, I want to see a promise on immigration that is deliverable and where the mechanisms will be spelled out.
Well, why do you have faith in Mrs May to deliver that, given her appalling record as Home Secretary, though?
But of course, she was also heavily restricted during that time by EU law.
She couldn't even control non-EU immigration, Anne.
Which is also subject to EU law on refugees.
Very well. I think we'll...
Wakey, wakey.
Wakey, wakey. It's 26 minutes past 12. Someone's trying to get a cat nap. I think we'll move on before we all fall asleep. Thank you very much. Now, old Choo-Choo was so overwhelmed by the prospect of another election that he bought a ticket on the Hindu Express from King's Cross to Goa. It's one way, so there is an upside. Sad man on the left, Alan Johnson's even more disenchanted with all of this democracy stuff. He said he's not playing anymore and he's off to write his memoirs. Again. Well, they do improve with repetition. Politics really is so boring these days. That's why we're putting apathy in this week's Spotlight. Let's call yet another national vote. But are we sick and tired of them?
Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't stand this. There's too much politics going on at the moment. Why does she need to do it?
Feeling confident, Prime Minister?
So what style of campaigning, if any, can win the electorate over?
I believe in campaigns where politicians actually get out and about and meet with voters. It's what I've always believed in. It's what I still believe in. I still do it.
Or is the cure for apathy to topple the political establishment altogether?
It's the establishment versus the people. It's our historic duty to make sure the people prevail.
But what of politicians themselves? Even some of them have had enough of the whole thing.
Thank you very much. All right, thanks. Cheerio.
So much stuff.
Grime artist Big Nasty encouraged young people to take part in last year's EU referendum. But does he still think voting's worthwhile? Or should we smash the system to bits? Big Nasty's here now, welcome.
Man like Big A. Thank you for having me, man.
Do you think people are getting bored with voting so often?
100%, man.
Yeah?
Just before the cameras came on, we just said it before, I was just like, bro, if you look in the last 20 years, it's still the same. The crackheads and the homeless are still sleeping in the city centres, in sleeping bags and on bags for life. So, with all the schemes and policies of what's happened, and this MP saying he's going to do this, and this politician going to do that, it still seems that the poor and poorer get poorer. The rich still say to stay the same and just pay higher tax. And instead of building council flats, we've always got a new need for a Tesco's or a Morrison or Tesco's local.
So you're saying it doesn't make any difference?
Not at all.
What do you say to that, Sugar?
Well, I think it does make a difference. And Big Nasty's from my neck of the woods, Lambeth. And I think one of the problems that faults, it's not a problem, it's a fault as politicians, is that we don't explain enough the tangible things that happen at the end of your road that have been the result of a political decision. So, I look in my area, 9 Sure Start children's centres, our secondary school buildings are a hell of a lot better than when you and I went to school. And our primary school buildings much better than when we went to school, and that was as a result of political decisions. New health centres which were built.
All right, that's it. Okay,
but we don't. People think it just springs up. They don't associate it with a political decision. That's our fault.
Big Nasty's reaction to that. So you got better schools, you got more Sure Start for kids to give them a better start in life. He says.
The gas thing about this whole situation, like. You say it like it's supposed to be that's supposed to be standard. So who do you think...
I agree, but it wasn't. We didn't have it before, did we?
But this is what's so sick about the situation.
Yeah.
So the politicians 20 years before you, yeah, when the elections was in and everyone's got their powerful Madonna Titanic speech about how they care for the community and all of that, in the positive week of doing stuff, it sounds nice. As I said before, yeah, see the things with elections, yeah, the focus is on the elections instead of the people, because the truth is, to do the real things what we need out here is not cool. It doesn't look fancy. And it also, to the establishment and how it sets, it's really uncomfortable, i.e. for more politicians to say, do you know what? There's like 20 square thousand feet left in the city centre. No, we're not going to build a new JD Sports. Do you know what? I think we should build some one-bed flats. But that's not cool to say, because that's going to ruin your campaign.
Let me bring it. Okay, let me bring it.
But this is what gets said all the time, though. So what the long-term effect of this problem is, because you said it just for a bit to get through and didn't do it, the next person said it and didn't do it. So now we're here on this road where man's saying, bro, politicians, you lot are dead food. Like, really and truly.
Dead food? What's dead food?
Dead food, like irrelevant, floppy disk, mini disk. Yeah. In the sense of, when you leave this place right now and all the lights go off and you go about your business, you've got a good job and you're okay. Let's talk about the people that will have to bang £88 every 2 weeks and also getting told that, raw, because they have a room in their house, you need to pay tax on that. Now, my thing is this. Most politicians, even prime ministers, if you want to run this country, yeah, we need to go back to the basics. It doesn't matter if you're poor or if you're rich. You need to have the mind state to think for more than just one. But the problem is now, like most places in the world, the poor outdo the rich.
What do you mean outdo?
Well, there's more people than there is rich people in the country.
Oh yeah, sure. No,
So let's look at it like this now.
I need to bring Anne. Would you come in?
1 minute, sorry, Miss A. I got you. This one's gonna burst your mind. This is some real G'd up stuff. Imagine this now. It's not your fault that you come from a loving home with 2 parents who have worked hard to give you a better future and provided some stability for you. But let's talk about the loads of kids who haven't. Now, how can a person who's had a perfect life, grown up in a perfect society, you've never banged an electric meter in your life, you've never sat in the passageway looking at a bailiff thinking, rah, how am I going to get this money?
Who are you talking to here?
The general life of people.
Oh, I thought you were talking to Anne Winterburn.
No.
Can I bring her in now?
Hold on, let me just finish this.
No, I'm very interested,
I'm
but
being very
we
patient.
like everyone to have a word here on this programme.
Oh, it's okay. I'm being very, very patient because
Ken Livingstone, before he became Britain's leading expert on Hitler, used to say that if they had, if voting mattered, they would abolish it.
If they had a what? I'm sorry.
If voting mattered, they would abolish it. That was his attitude.
I've always said that if there were compulsory voting and you had to give people a box saying none of the above would probably win quite often.
So you're agreeing with Big Nasty?
No, I'm not actually. Because
no, I didn't think you were.
No, I'm not. This is where I'm with Chucker. I think.
So they get together.
Yeah, well, on this, because just about everything that happens is governed by political decisions. From basic things like how often the rubbish is collected, all the way through to laws on Brexit. All these things are actually the product of political decisions and political understanding or misunderstanding. And we don't, Chucker's right, we don't often explain that. We don't often say, look, all these things have changed because somebody took that on board.
I'm going to give you the final word.
Well, all I'm going to say is this. Rastafari stands alone, Brethren. Yeah? And my thing is this. The problem with our country, too many people who have not come from the poor way of life and living in real life. Let's just talk about real life.
Well, we haven't got too much time to talk about
Well,
everything.
I'm gonna speed wrap it for you. Real life is this. Working over 16 hours, tax has been taken out, and it's hard enough for a normal person to afford to live in London. So you're working 16 hours and you can't afford, and you're still looking benefits. But if you've got a posh person telling you about raw, we're going to do more benefit cuts, and we're going to cut money from disabled kids, and we're going to cut money from the elders.
We're running over because we bump again.
Come on, Big A. Real stuff, BDL-based.
Again, good to see you.
Keep it shrill, Bree.
Keep it real. That's your lot for tonight, folks, but not for us. We're giving Lulu's the swerve tonight because we're off to the Bristol mansion of UKIP's Aaron Banks, where he's laid out his maps of the southeast of England, and together we'll pore over them to help him identify exactly where Clacton-on-Sea is. He probably needs to crack that conundrum before he offers himself as its MP. And we will help, because for us, public service is a 24/7 duty. Nighty-night. Don't let the voters bite.
We will.
I know nothing about Clacton at all. I mean, I've got a reputation for just saying that as it is. My plan is to go down to Clacton, see what the issues are, and then we'll start to campaign. I'm certainly going to buy a house there if elected. I think from the point of view of being MP for Clacton, I think I'll be a very effective MP. So when I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And we aim to win. I'm standing come hell or high water.